Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for holding this hearing today. I also want to thank all of you for coming today. Very much appreciate it. I want to say especially Ms. Vallas, thank you for being here. Before I came to this life, spent a lot of time working with Community Legal Services and the National Consumer Law Center, and I know the great work that you do on behalf of consumers and on behalf of our seniors every single day. So thank you. So I have a question about this, about the electronic, moving people to electronic payment. And I want to start here, Secretary Gregg. I understand there are many advantages to having people receive their payments electronically, advantages to the federal government, advantages to the recipients, and that you've been quite successful in moving people to this program. If I understood you correctly, all but about 2% of our eligible seniors receive their checks electronically now. But that also tells me that the 2% probably differ in some significant respects from the other 98% that are comfortable with this process. That the ones who have not made the transition are our oldest seniors, are people who are not comfortable with electronic payments, people who are impaired, people who live in rural areas, may not live where they will have access to their money, and people who are past victims of fraud. And so for some very obvious reasons would just feel more comfortable having a paper check. Now, I know that when we set this system up, we said we would permit waivers to the system and that you agreed that that would be the case. The problem is, and I think you've heard it multiple times here, the waiver system is a mess. Right now, there's very poor access to the system. We've heard this in repeated ways. It's hard to qualify. You have to be over 90. I noticed, Mr. Gregg, you said that people over 90 are automatically given waivers. I think what you mean is if they make it through the process to be able to request them, because that's sure not what the numbers seem to show, that people will qualify if they live in a rural area or if they have an impairment, a mental impairment. But we've also heard the forms are confusing. This business about the notaries, that it still says on the form that a notary is required, even though you say it's not. So here's my problem. In July, you're going to issue another letter, and I understand there's going to be a follow-up letter in the fall that's basically a letter threatening the last 2% that they've got to move over to electronic transfer, suggesting they will be breaking the law if they don't do that, and not making any indication in that letter that there are waivers available to people. So the question I have is twofold. One, whether or not you plan to fix the waiver system, and whether or not you plan to make some indication in that letter that waivers are available and what the criteria are for those waivers, and an easy way for people to be able to get them. Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Senator. I think one of the things that we've experienced over the last 2 years is we have made a transformation, and one that I would say is going to pay dividends for many, many years to come, not only in terms of reducing the cost, but in terms of people having access to a better payment mechanism, because they're far less likely to have a problem with a electronic payment than they are with a check. We had, in fiscal 2012, we had 500,000 instances of lost or stolen checks compared to about 7,000 on the Direct Express card.
Secretary Gregg, you're not going to get any pushback from me that the electronic system works better for the government and works better for almost all recipients. What we're talking about here is that last 2% that you're about to send a threatening letter to.
I was getting there.
Good.
As we started this campaign, many of the people who called in who may have been initially interested in a waiver actually in the course of the conversation said, no, that sounds okay. I'll switch to the Direct Express card or to direct deposit. So one of the things that we've been doing is really educating people about the options that are available. I agree that we haven't been strongly advocating the waiver, and we did that for a very important reason. Back in '98, when we initially issued regulations that pretty much had a self-waiver process, we didn't get very far. And so we wanted to go through a process that really encouraged electronic, and we are improving the waiver. We've done retraining of people at the Dallas call center that the chairman alluded to. We've sharpened up the form. We're also
Actually,
changing.
let's tick these off. So you've done some retraining, so people now on the phone will explain that a waiver is available?
What we'll do is we have 2 letters that go out reminding people that they should switch. We also will have in both letters in a month or so. We have it in one now. We'll have it in the second letter soon to say that if you think you qualify for a waiver, call this specific number at the Dallas call center, and there'll be someone trained there to help you.
Okay, so the letters that are going to go out will mention waivers and explain how to get those waivers.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm tracking this. And you said the waiver form itself has been improved?
Well, you know,
So that it no longer
I don't know
says-
what the timing was. When we met with actually committee staff a number of months ago, we discussed the issue on the notary, and we agreed to take that off. Now, it wasn't instant as far as changing the
enough.
form, because we agreed to it before we could do the paperwork to change the form. But that's no longer a requirement, and I don't know whether the form's been adjusted since then, but we don't require a notary.
Okay, and that the forms will be readily available?
We'll send them out for anyone who calls that number. We'll send them out to the individual that's requesting it.
Okay. Anything more on improving the waiver system? Did I get them all?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Ms. Vallas, could I ask you to comment? You've sort of lived this on the other side with your clients.
Thank you for the question, Senator.
I'm sorry, I'm a little over time. Is that okay, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Thank you.
I'm pleased to hear that Treasury is taking seriously the need to make the waiver process accessible. I have to say that the answers that I've heard so far have not fully reassured me that that's going to make the process accessible for those 3% that you were talking about. I think that one of the major difficulties is that the waiver form isn't publicly available. And so by virtue of forcing people to go through a process where you have to call a number and you actually have to do a little bit of battle to get the person to send you the form, and I can say that with personal experience. I was on the phone with a call center rep last week. I like to call in periodically with clients just to see what they're really going to experience. I had to fight with the call center rep just to get her to agree to send the form to my client who was on the phone with me.
So can I just stop you there for just a second, Ms. Valls? Secretary Gregg, did I understand the form will be made available only when people ask by telephone, or is there a reason you can't just download it if you've got someone who's got access to the internet?
Well, right now, what we have is if a person calls in and asks for a waiver, then if we're not able to convince them to go electronic, because we have been trying to do that and we've been very successful, then we would send them the form. The problem that I have with putting the form out there, like on the internet, is I expect that the increase would be that we've been moving towards as far as electronic would level off and we'd maybe fall back.
Well, what you're telling me is you might not catch the last 2%.
The issue really is in my opinion, that with the Direct Express card, it's better than a check. And while we have some waiver exceptions, we viewed those all along as being very limited exceptions for people.
Well, Mr. Gregg, that seems like what you've accomplished. You have 98% of seniors receiving their payments electronically by your own testimony. And the question is, for the last 2% who would qualify legally for a waiver, whether or not you're making that waiver accessible to them.
I understand.
And what I'm hearing you say, what you describe as we want to persuade them not to use the waiver, I'm hearing Ms. Vallas describe as I had to fight to get someone to send me by mail a copy of the waiver. And that we've got a government form. People are legally entitled to fill it out and make a request. And you're telling me you won't make that form available. And I'm just having some difficulty with that, Mr. Secretary.
We'll take that under consideration to see what else we can do to make the form more accessible. We're not interested in getting down to having every last person electronic. As I said in my brief opening statement, I feel that we've achieved our goal. The challenge is really to maintain where we're at, because not everyone, when they go into a Social Security office, even though they may or may not be really needing or qualify for a waiver, don't initially sign up. And so when we set this program up, we agreed to take on the waiver process so that we didn't burden Social Security. We did that for a good reason, because Social Security has a huge task in their hands. So we send follow-up letters to those individuals. Some of them don't want or need a waiver. In other cases, they do.
Fair enough, Mr. Gregg, but I think we can all agree that if we've established a program and that we do have people who are legally entitled to waivers and they want those waivers, that we need to make that accessible. And I think we have now agreement on that. Is that right, Mr. Secretary?
We'll take a look and see what all we can do. But I think the idea of making it easier, whether it's on the web or some other way, is something we'll look at very carefully and work with Social Security on.
All right.
I want to Senator Warren to continue, which it's such a pleasure that I can sit back and listen to you carry on the interrogation. And you don't realize it, Mr. Gregg, but she has sliced and diced you, because with a big smile, it doesn't feel painful at all. We don't want you to consider helping these people with a waiver. We want you to